Part 36. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 351. But so far, the strong wind has not stopped, and it continues to spread towards more demons. The leader of the Tianyu tribe was stunned on the spot like a sculpture. This was the first time he saw Lin An take action. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the fiercely burning flames in the sky. Both of his eyes were reflected by the flames and turned red. There was a feeling of dryness in my throat, as if I hadn't drank water for a long time. Gilug. Gilug. He swallowed the saliva into his stomach one bite at a time. What happened? That Senior Lin, obviously just waved his hand casually. But those demon enemies, were so many wiped out in this way? Even in the heyday of the human race. No one can do such a thing. All the human race members were looking up at the demon army that had been swallowed up by the flames that could burn the sky before they even had time to reach the ground. The humans who saw the scene couldn't believe what they were seeing. The extremely powerful demon army under the Void Lord. Being attacked like this. Annihilated. In the sky, the extremely huge troll was unable to react for a while. It just floated in the air with a stunned expression. At this moment, Lin An slowly turned his head and looked at the troll who was about 100 meters tall. He frowned slightly at Yi Zhan beside him and asked in an unhappy tone. Yi Zhan. This big guy. That's the one who was the noisiest just now. After Yi Zhan heard this, he quickly nodded to Lin An and said. That's right, Senior Lin. The next moment, the heavenly will in Lin An's body started to move again. The law of power. The law of speed. The power of these two laws emerged instantly, wrapping Lin An's body layer by layer. Boom. Lin An's body exploded and flew into the air like a missile. The ground that Lin An had stepped on suddenly appeared with a huge hole, as if it had been hit by a meteorite. A second later, Lin An's figure appeared in the sky. He was moving so fast that the space around him was torn apart by his body. At this time, the troll also saw Lin An's figure approaching him. Want to fight me in close combat? It's really overestimating one's abilities. He was originally afraid of the power that Lin An had used just now, which could easily kill the demon army, but now he saw that Lin An did not use that kind of power. Instead, when it adopted its best fighting method, a joy appeared in its heart. It's a troll. Under the command of the Void Lord, he used his powerful fighting ability to defeat the Blood and Bone Demon Lord, the Abyss Demon God and others, and became one of the 4 demon generals. With just one punch, even if the mountain below is made of steel, it will be smashed into powder. The troll clenched one of his fists, and the fist kept getting bigger. In the blink of an eye, it had grown about 10 times. Then he waved the huge fist and smashed it out at Lin An. At the same time, Lin also stretched out a fist and aimed it at the giant fist of the troll. The fist-sized gap between the two sides is like the gap between a lake and an endless ocean. There's no comparison at all. Soon, Lin's fist collided with the troll's fist. Quack, quack, quack. In an instant, there were bursts of bones breaking. Bang. 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 Accompanying the sound of bones breaking, there was also the sound of flesh and blood exploding. In just an instant, the sky was filled with endless blood mist, dyed blood red, and rain of blood fell to the ground. Ah! The troll felt a sharp pain that was simply unbearable, and let out a shrill roar. It struggled to open its eyes, which were covered with bloodshot eyes as dense as spider webs, and looked at its arms in horror. But it didn't see its own arm, it only saw Lin An who was still approaching. My arm. His arm, was punched into powder by this human? In this era, how could there be humans with this kind of power? He has never suffered such a setback in a pure competition of strength. Even the 4 great monarchs cannot make it feel such a sense of powerlessness. And at the next moment, Lin An's figure appeared directly in front of the troll. He looked at the troll with cold eyes, and his brows were still slightly frowning. "You're too noisy." After saying that, Lin raised his fist again and punched out with a punch, hitting the troll's head straight. Boom! There was a loud noise, and the troll's head exploded, losing its breath of life forever. At the same time, the power of the law of fire, the law of wind and the law of sharpness that he had previously used also swallowed up the entire army of demons in the sky. All the demons were killed in this extremely terrifying situation. He was crushed into dust by the powerful attack. Lin An's eyes slowly looked at the formations in the valley again, and his body moved closer to the formations. All the humans on the ground were raising their heads high at this moment, looking towards the sky where there were no more enemies. All the enemies were all killed. It's too scary. Senior Lin actually did this kind of thing alone. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would never have believed it. Lin En appeared in front of the formation in the valley, stretched out a hand and touched the formation. On the palm of his hand, a faint concern flickered, and complex runes emerged one by one. He closed his eyes tightly and began to decipher the layers of formations. At this time, Yi Zhan withdrew his gaze from high in the sky and looked at Lin En, who was immersed in breaking the formation. Immediately, waves of doubts arose in his heart. Senior Lin wants to do this from the outside? Will you crack the formation of this promised land? This approach is not very realistic. The formation at the promised land can only be lifted from within. Shaking his head gently, Yi Zhan withdrew his eyes from Lin An's body. Even though Lin An has shown extremely strong fighting power, the way of formation and the way of fighting are completely different. Even someone like the Lord of the Void, it is absolutely impossible to have strong combat power at the same time. He is also proficient in formations. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yi Tiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 352. But it was in Yi Zhan's somewhat suspicious eyes. The formation in the valley of the promised land also flashed with golden light, and this golden light continued to dissipate between heaven and earth. One by one, the complicated runes were also gradually erased. Crack! 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 The formation began to break layer by layer, and Lin An's palm continued to stretch forward as the formation disappeared. A few minutes later, the formation engraved by the formation master was left with only the last one. Lin An's palm touched the last formation, and a faint golden light emerged. This last formation began to dissipate rapidly. Yi Zhan stood stiffly behind Lin En, his two eyes were already staring with all his strength, as if they were about to fall out of their sockets. His brain only felt a burst of stuffiness, as if someone had hit his head hard with a hammer. The formation. It was actually cracked. Who is Senior Lin? He actually did this. It's something that I dare not even imagine. It's incredible. At this time, the last formation was completely eliminated. Everyone looked towards the promised land in the valley. At this time, the promised land was also in chaos. Fights were breaking out everywhere, and all the humans who had come here were fighting with the various demons under the command of the Void Lord. The number of these demons was dozens of times more than that killed by Lin An just now. There was also one who belonged to the Void Lord, one of the 4 demons. They all started slaughtering humans in this promised land. The ground was full of corpses of humans and demons. In comparison, there were more corpses of humans. Obviously, in this war, humans were already at a disadvantage. Yi Zhan looked at the tragic scene in the promised land and couldn't help but sigh. It's really a conspiracy. We were calculated by the Lord of the Void. Duh. 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 He walked a few steps to Lin En and asked Lin En. Senior Lin, what should we do now? Lin En looked around in the promised land and asked. Are all the human tribes here except us? Yi Zhan nodded. Yes. Senior Lin. While still looking around, Lin En also said. You go and help. Hearing this, Yi Zhan and others all joined the battlefield. But with their joining, the power of the human race was supplemented. But they still couldn't control the situation. Lin En stood alone at the entrance of the valley, with a thoughtful look in his eyes, and murmured in a low voice. Since all the human race is here, then my goal has been partially achieved. He originally agreed to come here with Yi Zhan and others because he wanted to conquer the human race of this era. Once these human races are conquered, even for him, they will become a great help. And as long as he has these people, he can easily grasp all the situations on the earth now. Now the formation at the entrance has been restored again. The outside world has no way of knowing what happened in this formation. I don't have to reserve my strength to deal with these demons. When Lin En was dealing with those demons before, he had been deliberately not using all his strength. Because if he used all his strength in the outside world, he would definitely be known by the Void Lord and others. At that time, things will become a little troublesome. Duh. 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 It was not until those formations were fully restored once again that Lin En began to move forward. At the same time, the white sword appeared in his hand, and the two eyes were purple, with a constant luster flashing inside. The will of heaven contained in his body emitted a strong silver light and rotated rapidly. For a time, the power of various laws began to be mobilized by Lin En. Space law, sharp law, strength law, speed law, suspension law, burning law. The power of a large number of laws, at this moment, all gathered on the sword body of the white sword. The terrifying power fluctuations emanated from the white sword. Cut. Lin En raised the white sword high and slashed it directly into the sky. Boom. The next moment, the whole sky was shaken, and the sword body of the white sword instantly split into millions of sharp blades. Large tracts of space were slashed by the white sword, and the bodies of demons were slashed by the white sword and fell to the ground. The sky was full of traces of the white sword. The human race and the demon race, who were originally fighting, subconsciously stopped at this moment. They were all watching this mysterious sword that kept crossing the space. The owner could easily kill the demons, densely packed with sword blades. What kind of method is this? It's so strong, those demons have no way to resist it. We are saved. We are saved. More and more members of the demons were killed by the white swords, and their bodies fell uncontrollably on the ground. Even the demon, one of the 4 demon generals, was cut by hundreds of split white swords. It knelt on the ground with a plop, and it looked at Lin En holding the white sword in the distance. In the eyes filled with blood, there were only waves of disbelief. Why? There are such strong people in the human race. The next moment, his whole body split into dozens of petals, and he didn't understand until his death who killed him. These millions of white swords, after a few minutes of crisscrossing in this promised place, slowly stopped. Then these white swords began to disappear. Yun looked at Lin En, who was slowly moving in the battlefield. Her beautiful eyes were filled with a fanatical admiration that seemed to be extremely strong. So strong. Thanks to Senior Lin. With Senior Lin here, I feel so safe. At this time, Lin En was floating in the air again, and all the surviving humans looked at Lin En. After Lin En's eyes roughly scanned the ground, his eyes became much more serious, and he said in a calm voice, I am Lin En, the ruler of Zhu domain. Are you willing to join my Zhu domain? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 353. Everyone's eyes turned to Lin En at this moment. When they heard Lin En's words, their expressions became dull in an instant, and their eyes were wide open, and their pupils were shaking like an earthquake. They looked at Lin En in disbelief, as if they had heard a news that was like the sky falling. What? Lin En? The ruler of Jiuzhou territory? Isn't this the fifth monarch in the legend? The great emperor of the human race? Lin Emperor? Although they felt incredible, some people still held a skeptical attitude. Is it really, Lin Emperor? But his appearance is obviously not. Are you kidding? It's all because of this news, which is too shocking. The people who were most shocked by what Lin En said were Yun and Yazan, who were most familiar to Lin En. Gilug. Gilug. Yizhan swallowed his saliva into his stomach. He looked at Lin En and said in an uncontrollable tone. Senior Lin. You are Emperor Lin. When Yizhan said this, his voice was trembling. He did not doubt whether Lin En's words were true or false, but he still felt unbelievable. Although he had thought about Lin En's identity many times, he had never associated Lin En with the legendary human Emperor Lin did. The legendary Emperor Lin did not have much connection with them. Lin En looked at these human races who were obviously unbelievable, raised one hand, and gently touched his face. The next moment, Lin En's figure began to become illusory, his face was in a hazy blur, and his figure began to change. After a few seconds, Lin En's disguise had been completely lifted, and he returned to his original appearance. Yizhan's eyes had been on Lin En. When he saw Lin En's new look, he subconsciously raised his head and looked at Lin En's Dharma image sitting in the universe outside the earth. Huh! He took a deep breath, and his pupils suddenly expanded. Exactly the same. Senior Lin and Emperor Lin's appearance are really exactly the same. So Senior Lin is really Emperor Lin. That's right. This is the only explanation. No wonder Senior Lin can possess such a terrible power. So the real reason is this. Boom. Yizhan quickly recovered from the shock and surprise, then suddenly knelt on the ground, prostrated himself on the ground, and bowed deeply to Lin En. Yizhan, the leader of the Xuanhuan tribe, is willing to submit to Lord Lindi and will never betray him forever, but if he has two minds, he will be struck by lightning and fall into a place of no return. Yizhan knew very well what his actions meant. From then on, there was a higher existence above his head, and everything he had to do had to be asked for the permission of that existence. But he was willing to do it, and he knew that this choice was the best and only choice. Then, Yun and other members of the Xuanhuan tribe bowed deeply in front of Lin En. Yun, a member of the Xuanhuan tribe, is willing to submit to Lord Lindi and will never betray him forever, but if he has two minds, he will be struck by lightning and fall into a place of no return. Chen Dong, a member of the Xuanhuan tribe, is willing to submit to Lord Lindi and will never betray him forever, but if he has two minds, he will be struck by lightning and fall into a place of no return. At this moment, the entire Xuanhuan tribe knelt in front of Lin En, and from then on the Xuanhuan tribe became a branch of the Jiuzhou domain. The rest of the human races did not react for a while, they were still immersed in the huge shock brought by the exposure of Lin En's identity. He is actually Emperor Lin. This strength is too strong. Is this Emperor Lin, the great emperor of our human race? After they reacted, they all knelt down in front of Lin En one by one, swearing allegiance to Lin En. In this promised land, all the surviving human races surrendered to Lin En from the bottom of their hearts. The human race needs a leader like Lin En. Looking at the densely packed people kneeling, Lin En's eyes flickered slightly. With the surrender of all human races in this promised land, Lin En can be said to have mastered all the information of this era. These human race masters have a deep understanding of this era. Who? After taking a deep breath, he slowly said, "Get up." Hearing this, Yizhan and others all stood up from the ground, looking at Lin En with respect, waiting for Lin En's next order. Lin En kept scanning these human beings. All he saw on them was the fatigue hidden under the excitement. Even Yun and Yazan had a strong breath of fatigue. You go to the Juzhu domain first. After saying that, the will of heaven in Lin An's body began to rotate again. He raised his hand and pointed his palm in the direction of the Juzhu domain in the universe. The power of the law of space surged out recklessly and violently, and the space in this promised land was distorted. At the same time, the outside world was also greatly affected. The distortion of space spread from this promised land to the universe, where the Juzhu domain was located. Lin An's purpose of coming here has basically been achieved, and he no longer needs to worry about anything. As the fluctuation of the distortion of space became more and more intense, a huge space portal entrance also appeared inside the promised land, and in response, the exit of the portal appeared in the Juzhu domain, next to the Tree of Life. At this moment, Chen Daoming has also arrived here. Go in. Walk through this portal and you can directly enter the Juzhu area. Duh. 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 The sound of footsteps continued to sound, and one by one, the human race walked into the portal. In the Juzhu area, people of various races appeared one by one. And at this time, the Void Lord, who had been staying in the Void Hall, waiting for his subordinates to report. The tightly closed eyes opened in an instant, and turned his head to look directly in the direction of the promised land. This is the breath of the Juzhu area. Is that guy here? The Void Lord stood up from the Void Throne, waved his hand to tear open the space, crossed tens of thousands of miles of rivers, and appeared above the promised land. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 354. Yun also walked into the space portal and arrived in Juzhu in the blink of an eye. The moment she arrived here, she raised her head and looked up. At the location of the Tree of Life, Lin An's huge Dharma image could be seen more clearly. Is this Juzhu? Yun continued to look around, and she even saw the earth. It's different from where we live. In Juzhu. It's so peaceful. It makes me feel particularly at ease. While she couldn't help but sigh, more and more humans from various races in the old era continued to appear in Juzhu. The figure of the Void Lord appeared above the Promised Land. At this moment, the formations used to cover the Promised Land were also affected and invalidated due to the violent space distortion. He looked down and saw only the huge space portal and the human race who were constantly walking into the space portal. In addition, there is the one he has in mind, Lin En. However, this thought is not because he misses Lin En, but he has been thinking about it and wants to kill Lin En himself to relieve his resentment. Emperor Lin. It is you. The moment he saw Lin En, the Void Lord shouted loudly in the air. The humans below, hearing this voice full of strong anger, subconsciously raised their heads and looked at the sky. Immediately, the eyes of these humans widened one by one, and there was a burst of fear in them. He is the Void Lord. Oh no! The Void Lord is here. We are finished. At this time, Lin En also raised his head and looked at the sky. His body slowly floated up and approached the Void Lord in the sky. Soon, Lin En and the Void Lord were standing on the same level, and the distance between the two was only 100 meters. Lord of the Void, you finally showed up. When he knew that the situation of these humans on Earth was caused by Lord of the Void. Even Lin En, who was always calm, couldn't help but feel a burst of anger. Lord of the Void looked at Lin En with undisguised anger in his eyes, and said in a very fierce tone. Emperor Lin, I didn't expect you to dare to enter the Earth. And you saved all my prey. The more he said, the more angry Lord of the Void became, and his two palms were even tightly clenched together. The frustration he suffered from Lin En last time was a shame he had never experienced in his countless years of roaming the world. As long as Lin En was alive, he would have no way to forget his embarrassed appearance at the time. He continued. Before, I was worried that the immortals would join forces with you to deal with me. And Juzhu is your territory. I don't know much about it. I don't know what cards you have. That's why I was afraid and chose to leave. But today, you came to the earth by yourself. This is our territory. Be prepared to die here. Lin An couldn't help but sneer, and said indifferently. Just you. The Void Lord was completely enraged, and directly turned into dozens of figures and attacked Lin En. Each of these figures was a real entity. The entire space was turbulent, as if the entire sky was overturned, and dark holes full of destructive breath appeared in the sky one after another. Even the sky turned into a dark color, making all the people on the ground who saw the sky feel a wave of depression. Those human members below the demigod level were even a little unable to breathe smoothly. Yi Zhan did not enter the space portal. He originally planned to leave after all the members of the Xuanhuan tribe entered. But he did not expect that the Void Lord would appear here. When he saw the Void Lord start to attack, a lot of cold sweat permeated uncontrollably on his forehead. He spoke with some fear. This is the power of the Void Lord. Sure enough, I can't compare to it. He couldn't help but feel a trace of despair in his heart. Facing such a powerful strength, he felt deep despair. What should I do now? Although Lindy's strength is really strong. But as the Void Lord said, the situation at the time was special. Can he really resist the Void Lord? And at this time, the dozens of figures had shattered countless spaces and were infinitely close to Lin En. But Lin En was still just floating in the air motionlessly, staring at the Void Lord, looking at the place where he was originally standing. He sneered and said, "Collapse." The next moment, a small black dot suddenly appeared in Lin En's right eye. After the black dot appeared, it began to spread rapidly, like a drop of pure ink dropped into the spring water. In an instant, the eye was completely dyed black, a pure black color. At a glance, the whole person's soul seemed to be sucked in. A small force of collapse spread out in an instant. The dozen figures that had come to Lin En touched the power called collapse. At this moment, the dozen or so figures that were moving quickly all stopped in place. Crack! 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 A series of slight explosions sounded, and the dozen or so figures directly became countless dust. These dozen or so clones of the Void Lord were completely destroyed without even touching Lin En. Even the space where these dozen or so figures were located had collapsed, and endless black hole-like holes suddenly emerged. Seeing this scene that was completely beyond his expectations, the Void Lord once again appeared in the sky from the void where he was hiding. His brows knitted together, his pupils shrank suddenly, and he stared at Lin En. How is it possible? Collapse. This power is the power of collapse. No. Impossible. Why does he have the power of collapse? At this time, the power of collapse has affected the body of the Void Lord. He saw with his own eyes that his fingers began to decompose at a slow speed. The feeling of the collapse of the era that he had personally experienced once again emerged from his mind. It is indeed like this. He actually has the power of collapse. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 355. The Void Lord is now completely sure that Lin En can use the mysterious power of collapse. He quickly retreated several thousand meters away, and the finger that had been decomposed a little stopped at this moment. Huh. After a long breath, the Void Lord sighed. What a surprise! The power of collapse actually appeared on him. But although the Void Lord felt very surprised, he quickly adjusted his mentality. Although he was a little afraid of the power of collapse, as long as he paid more attention, he could avoid being swallowed by the power of collapse. Lin En was still floating in the same place, and his two eyes, one purple and one black, looked at the Void Lord indifferently as if there was no emotional fluctuation. The power of collapse has indeed become much weaker for a strong man of this level. Just now, Lin En used the power of collapse just to conduct an experiment, so the power of collapse just now was not used with full strength. Once he uses the power of collapse with all his strength, the Void Lord will definitely be severely injured, but at that time, Lin En will also be greatly affected. The blackness of the black pupil gradually faded, and the purple pupil emerged again. After holding the white sword tightly in his hand, Lin En took a step forward, and the whole person's figure completely disappeared from the air, and slashed towards the Void Lord, who retreated a distance. Since the appearance of the Void Lord, Yi Zhan has been looking up at the sky. At this moment, he also saw the scene of Lin En chasing the Void Lord. The sweat beads on his forehead became more and more, and his heart was beating at a frequency that he had never had before, and a dry feeling rose in his throat. So strong. It's really a long time to see. The dignified Void Lord. He chose to retreat in the face of Emperor Lin. How terrifying is Emperor Lin's strength. At the same time, the Void Lord, who had returned to normal, had already looked at Lin En, who was approaching him rapidly. He raised his hands and clenched them into the air. Chaos Axe. 2 axes, all black and dotted with some evil patterns, appeared in his hands. He held the 2 axes tightly and swung them continuously, colliding with Lin En's white sword that had already been cut down. Clang! 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 2 black afterimages continuously collided with a white afterimage. In just less than 3 seconds, the Chaos Axe and the white sword had fought dozens of times. A strong impact was set off because of this continuous fighting. The impact spread in all directions, like a violent hurricane, and the countless stones and plants in the promised land were swept up by the wind and bombarded all around. The hair of those humans danced wildly in the wind, and their clothes could be torn at any time. Those who can't bear it, hurry into the space portal. The strength of Emperor Lin and Lord Void is too terrifying. Just being affected is enough to make me unable to bear it. After that, some weaker members of the human race took difficult steps and walked into the towering space portal. When they walked out of the space portal and appeared in the Zhuzhu area, they fell to the ground one by one. They breathed in the calm air. And just when this violent fluctuation appeared, the giant crocodiles of the era all looked at the place where Lin En and Lord Void were fighting. They were very cautious and observed carefully, fearing that they would inadvertently cause themselves these 2 big troubles. At the same time, the battle between Lin En and Lord Void continued. Clang! 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 The white sword chopped down again and again, and the Chaos Axe was constantly slashing out. The 2 divine weapons collided again and again. The positions of the 2 of them were constantly changing during the battle. Every battle would have a huge impact on everything around them. Boom! 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 Mountains were shattered, and rivers were overturned. The ground was also cut into gullies like the abyss. Countless numbers were destroyed, and a large number of monsters were killed. It was like the end of the world was sweeping across the earth. Those old-time giant crocodiles who watched Lin En fight the Void Demon Lord. After seeing the scene of countless things being destroyed, their eyes became solemn, and their hearts were heavy at the moment. It is worthy of being called the 5th monarch, Emperor Lin. In a simple power contest, he is not inferior to the Void Monarch at all. I really didn't expect it. It is obviously just the human race that is least suitable for cultivation. But it has this, which can be said to be the strongest power. Boom! 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 The battle between Lin En and the Void Monarch has been fought from the agreed place of the human race all the way to the land dominated by the Void Monarch in the east of the earth. During the battle, countless materials have been destroyed by Lin En and the Lord of the Void. If all the materials destroyed by the 2 of them were accumulated together, it would be enough to create another moon. And at the moment when Lin En and the Lord of the Void entered the Void Palace, the demons under the Lord of the Void, who were staying in the Void Palace, all looked at the 2 of them at this moment. 2 of the 4 demon generals under the Lord of the Void have died at this moment, and the other two are staying in the Void Palace. In addition to these 4 demon generals, there are many other demon kings and demon gods. One of the 4 demon generals looked up at the 2 who were fighting, and a hint of murderous intent flashed in his pupils. It seems that it will be difficult to tell the winner between Lord Monarch and Emperor Lin for a while. Let's do it too. Go and help the Lord to deal with Emperor Lin. With our participation, Lord Monarch can definitely kill Emperor Lin here. The other subordinates of the Lord of the Void agreed. The next moment, they all rushed into the sky and rushed to the side of the Void Lord. When Lin An saw the appearance of this group of demons, the white sword that was slashed again and again finally stopped. The Void Lord also seized this opportunity and separated himself from Lin An again. He appeared in front of his men, turned his head to look at them, and a touch of joy appeared between his eyebrows. You came at the right time. Next, join me in attacking. Kill Emperor Lin here. The Void Lord doesn't care about fairness or unfairness. His original purpose is to kill Lin An. As long as he can kill Lin An, he doesn't care what means he takes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 356. The demons under the Lord of the Void, who were the least powerful and capable of fighting Yizhan, received the order from the Lord of the Void. They all looked at Lin An with strong murderous intent, and they were ready to fight Lin An with all their strength. Your Majesty, please give the order. One of the 4 demon generals said in a solemn voice. Lin An still had an indifferent expression on his face at this moment, floating in the sky not far away from the Void Lord and others. His purple eyes did not fluctuate at all because the Void Lord had a group of powerful helpers. It was as if all of this happened as he expected. Lin An said with a very cold tone. Void Lord. What's the use of even 100 more of these stinky fish and rotten shrimps? The results won't change anything. The Lord of the Void breathed heavily to relieve the slight feeling of weakness caused by the continuous battles. Emperor Lin. Whether it works or not, you won't know until you try it. As soon as he finished speaking, the murderous intent in the Void Lord's eyes suddenly became several times stronger than before. He spoke again. Do it. Don't attack Emperor Lin without any reservation. After saying that, the Void Lord directly raised the Chaos Axe in his hand high, and the dark and twisted power instantly covered it. Boom! Boom! The sky became gloomy as a result, and black thunder and lightning flashed continuously. Countless substances in the air are being annihilated rapidly. At the same time, the demon leaders with outstanding strength under the Void Lord also began to attack Lin. The claw strikes that tore the entire world apart, the sword-like feather thrusts that covered the sky and the earth, the raindrops and snowflakes that were sharper than knives. Dozens of attacks converged, causing the entire earth to be in a state of shock. It was like a magnitude 10 earthquake occurred all over the world at the same time. Countless mountain peaks are collapsing, and huge waves are rising everywhere in the ocean. Even an asteroid is facing a lot of attacks. It will also be easily blown to pieces. And the target of this powerful attack was Lin An. Wow! Wow! Lin An's clothes were fluttering and dancing in the wind due to the violent impact of this attack. He took the white sword that exuded pure luster in his hand, raised the white sword, and pointed the tip of the sword straight at the attack that was coming like a huge wind and a huge wave. The right eye once again began to turn toward darkness, and the power of collapse surged out violently, instantly wrapping around the body of the white sword. Lin An drank lightly. Cut. The next moment, the white sword was first raised high, and then slashed down without hesitation. Whoosh! A jet black sword light appeared directly in this world as the white sword containing the power of collapse was slashed. This jet black sword light is like the Milky Way, stretching endlessly. It's like a pitch-black Milky Way hanging between heaven and earth. Boom. 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 From high altitude to the ground, wherever the black blade touched, it began to rapidly collapse. The whole world seemed to be cut in half by the sword light. Less than a second later, the black sword light struck by Lin and collided with the attacks launched by the Void Lord and others. Boom. In an instant, the attacks of the Void Lord and others were directly chopped into pieces by the sword light. These extremely powerful attacks were as fragile as a piece of paper in front of Lin An's sword light, without any resistance. Feather Demon, one of the 4 demon generals, looked at this scene. The wings that were waving behind him and shooting out feathers one after another suddenly stopped at this moment. The face that originally showed a cruel and joking smile became stiff at this moment. What's this? One sword, it's really just one sword. Their numerous all-out attacks. It has been completely destroyed. Over the years, he has never seen people like Lin. But at this time, the black sword light that shattered all attacks still continued to move forward. The speed of this sword light was terrifyingly fast. In less than a breath, it had already crossed a distance of hundreds of meters and appeared in front of the Void Lord and others. The Void Lord's pupils suddenly shrank, and he used the fastest speed in his life to quickly turn around and escape. But the generals under his command had no time to escape. Ah! Help! They could only watch the black sword light slashing at the body, and then the body would be annihilated and disappear bit by bit. It was not until a few seconds later that the black sword light slowly dispersed, and at the same time, the outstanding demon warriors under the Void Lord also completely dispersed. Not even the slightest trace of its previous existence was left. No matter how many plots and tricks you have, I, Lin En, will kill them all with one sword. And at this time, I felt that the black sword light that made the soul couldn't help but tremble disappeared. The Void Lord, who was escaping quickly, finally stopped. He turned his head again and looked at where Lin En was with great fear. But all he saw was Lin En holding a white sword. Not even the scum of the demon soldiers under his command were left behind. Buzz! It was like the thunder from the 9 heavens exploded in his mind, completely shattering all the inherent cognitions into pieces. The pair of claws holding the chaos axe had begun to tremble uncontrollably. All. Destroy, destroy. Emperor Lin. So strong. The choice I made this time, was the worst choice. If I had known better, I would not have provoked Emperor Lin. There was only regret left in his heart at this moment. Not only did he fail to achieve his goal of completely destroying Lin En and the human race. Instead, he paid a heavy price. His powerful demon warriors and a large number of elite demon soldiers all died in the hands of the people led by Lin En. This time, the Lord of the Void lost both his wife and his troops. At this time, Lin En slowly took back the sword that he had slashed out, and looked towards the Void Lord who had stopped in the distance. A touch of irony flashed through his eyes as calm as the sea of stars. Now you. After saying this, Lin took a step forward. The fluctuations of space laws emerge. His figure disappeared from this world in an instant. When Lin En appeared again, he had already appeared in front of the Void Lord. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 357. And at the moment Lin En appeared in front of the Void Lord, the white sword in his hand was once again raised high. The tip of the sword pointed straight at the sky that had become shattered. A white afterimage slashed down like thunder, and the sword body of the white sword carried swift power and slashed towards the Void Lord. At this time, the Void Lord finally returned to normal from the shock. His 2 wide eyes looked at the swordsman who was slashing down. He quickly raised the chaos axe in his hands and charged forward in confusion. Zheng! The white sword once again struck the chaos axe abruptly. This time the white sword slash was different from the previous slashes, It carried the power of Honkai impact. Click. 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 In an instant, cracks appeared on the chaos axe struck by the white sword. And after this crack appeared, it didn't stop there, but more cracks continued to emerge. Whoosh. 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 When the number of cracks reached its extreme, the fragments on the chaos axe began to fall downwards. The scene where dense black chaos axe fragments fell was like a heavy black rain starting to fall in the sky. The Lord of the Void's hands were shaking more frequently, and his palms had turned red due to the impact of the huge power. A strong sense of numbness spread from his hands to his mind. The face of the Lord of the Void was filled with a look of despair, and he said in a stunned tone, "Broken, broken. Chaos axe. I was actually attracted by this white sword. Is the destruction like this?" Ever since the Void Lord began to rise, the Chaos Axe has been accompanying him. In the era in which he was born, with his tyrannical strength and his pair of invincible Chaos Axes, it seemed as if he could cut open the world. He suppressed the whole era forcefully, and finally survived the collapse of the end of the world with his tyrannical strength. But today, the pair of Chaos Axes that have accompanied him for countless years and killed countless powerful enemies. He was actually given a sword blow by Lin En. Cut into countless pieces. This was something he never expected. At the same time, Lin En did not pause much after slashing the sword. He swung the white sword again, but this time he did not slash towards the Void Lord again. Instead, he held the long sword straight and concentrated his power on the white sword. Lin En looked at the Void Lord with a cold gaze. The next moment, Lin En, who had already accumulated all his strength, stabbed the Void Lord in front of him with an extremely powerful force containing the power of collapse. A white light flashed rapidly, and everyone watching the scene from a distance saw only a white light in front of their eyes, and a strong stinging pain rose from their pupils. What kind of move is this? It actually affected me. What a terrifying power. After a second, the white light slowly dissipated. The vision of those who were watching the battle in a distant place returned to normal. They immediately turned their attention to the place where Lin En fought with the Void Lord. At this time, Lin En's white sword, which was thrust out with huge power, had already pierced the Void Lord's chest. Boom! A force so powerful that it could destroy the world struck at the heart of the Void Lord. The space around the Void Lord's body was directly shattered and began to collapse. And on his face, there was an uncontrollable look of extreme pain. Puff! A mouthful of bright red blood was spat out by the Lord of the Void, and a huge hole appeared in his heart. The hole was half as big as his body. Everything behind the Void Lord was also affected. Large areas of space fell into chaos, and the mountains within sight turned into dust. Blood continued to flow from his broken body. And at this time, Lin En was still looking at Lin En with eyes that showed no emotion. He slowly opened his mouth and said in an extremely cold tone, "Goodbye." The next moment, the power of Lin's attack began to explode. The seriously injured body of the Void Lord suddenly fell directly towards the Void Palace below. Boom! Just a second later, his body fell onto a square in the Void Palace. Boom! 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 The square also collapsed in an instant and turned into a ruin, sending up billowing dust and smoke. The Lord of the Void lay motionless on the ground among the ruins. He barely opened his eyes and looked at Lin En with a blurry vision, standing proudly in the sky like a god. His strength is so much stronger than mine. In this world, no one can defeat Emperor Lin in a one-on-one situation. He could be called invincible. Whoops! Whoops! His breathing continued to become weaker, and the pain on his face became more and more intense. Blood was constantly pouring out from everywhere in the Void Lord's body. Cough! Cough! He couldn't help coughing twice, and a lot of blood poured out of his mouth. Crunch! Crunch! The Void Lord used all the remaining strength in his body and slowly raised one hand. He pointed with this hand at Lin En, who was high in the sky, and said with great suffering, Lin Emperor. I failed, defeated. Bang. After finishing these words, the Void Lord's hand fell to the ground feebly. The eyes that were barely open finally closed, and his breathing seemed to have stopped. Lin En, whose body was floating in the sky, glanced at the Void Lord with deep meaning from the bottom of his head. Then he twisted his body, put away the white sword, and gently tore it apart with his hand, and a space passage emerged. He stepped into it and left this world. The moment Lin En left, the space channel he tore out quickly closed. At this time, those giant crocodiles of the old era who have been paying attention to the battle between the Void Lord and Lin. They all subconsciously looked at the Void Lord lying quietly among the ruins of the Void Palace. Hiss. All the giant crocodiles from the old era who saw the scene couldn't help but gasped hard, and their eyes widened uncontrollably. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 358. I can't believe that the Void Lord will be defeated one day. Emperor Lin. Is this the legendary great emperor of the human race, the Emperor Lin who occupied the entire universe? I surrender. The human race is destined to rise. At the same time, in the sky above the Promised Land, a space channel emerged, and Lin En's figure walked out of it. He put his hands behind his back and looked at the world in front of him calmly. This world is still in a mess. The damage caused by the battle between Lin En and the Void Lord has not been repaired in time. In the Promised Land, the humans of various races who have not left yet also raised their heads high at this moment, and looked at Lin En flying in the sky with admiration in their eyes. Lin En took a deep breath, and the pair of eyes that had returned to purple flashed with a faint luster. He blinked his eyes slightly, and then he opened his mouth and shouted to all the beings on the earth. All races watching this, listen to me. From now on, I will protect the human race on earth, no matter what era. If in the future, no matter what era the human race is attacked and slaughtered by some other races, then I will directly regard it as a provocation to me. I will act mercilessly and completely wipe out that race in this world. Even if I am the enemy of the whole world, I will still do it. So if you don't want to suffer such a disaster, don't take the initiative to provoke the human race. No human race in any era. Although Lin En's voice was not very loud, it contained a strange power, and it easily spread rapidly throughout the world. As long as you know Lin En's existence, you will hear what Lin En said. The human race who stayed in the Promised Land were the first to hear Lin En's words. Their faces were filled with ecstasy. The moment Lin En finished speaking, cheers like a huge wave burst out from the mouths of these human races. Great! Great! Our human race finally has a real foothold. God has eyes. After so many years, our human race finally has a great emperor who can suppress everything in the world. As long as Emperor Lin is here, the human race will no longer have to live in the darkness of the past. Emperor Lin! Emperor Lin! Emperor Lin! Lin En did not stop the cheers that broke out below. He knew very well that these human races below had been living in deep frustration. After the second spiritual energy revival of the earth was completed, humans were already in a weak position, and later because of the grievances between Lin En and the Void Lord, the human race fell into an even more passive situation. If he had not come to the earth to investigate the situation, I am afraid that these human races would have been completely trapped in a place of no return. So these humans need a chance to vent, and this is the best time. Lin En's words echoed in the sky, and they didn't dissipate for a long time. All the aliens who heard these words fell into silence. After a long time, sighs came from the mouths of the rulers of these aliens. Hey, from today on, don't provoke the human race. The human race is no longer something that our small race can provoke. It seems that with the sudden appearance of Emperor Lin, the human race is destined to rise in this last era. The last glory. I can't imagine the world. I never thought that the Void Monarch would be defeated by a human in the end. On the big stage of this last era, I'm afraid the human race is the race that can stand to the end. The Black Snake Valley is a place ruled by various snake monsters. In this race, there is a prison dedicated to holding humans. At the end of the second spiritual revival, the Black Snake King led many snake demons to carry out a large-scale sweep of the nearby human tribes. They captured all the humans in these human tribes by violent means and imprisoned them in the prison. The purpose of the Black Snake King was very clear, which was to store these humans as food. In order to prevent some bad effects caused by food shortages when the doomsday collapse came. For many races, humans are the most delicious food. At this time, the Black Snake King was sitting on his throne with a gloomy face. Damn it, how could such a thing appear among the human race? My plan has been completely disrupted. In this Black Snake Valley, in the prison that specifically imprisoned humans, thousands of humans were roaring at this moment. Let us out? Do you want to anger Mr. Linde? If Mr. Linde knows that you are doing this to us, you will be finished. You have also seen the strength of Mr. Linde. The Black Snake King heard all these roars. He raised his arms and kept rubbing his aching head. His capable man walked up to him with a frown and asked in a helpless tone. Your Majesty, what should we do now? These humans continue to be locked up. Or let them go. After saying that, it shut up and stood aside, waiting for the Black Snake King's answer. The Black Snake King's vertical pupils were full of helplessness. It couldn't help but let out a long sigh, and then slowly answered. We can only let these humans go. As they say. If this makes Emperor Lin angry, then the end will come early for us. The Black Snake King has already figured everything out in his heart. After his capable men heard this, they turned around and left here, walking towards the prison where humans were imprisoned. Open the prison door and let all these humans go. After a while, thousands of humans left the Black Snake Valley. And like Black Snake Valley, there are still many races that use humans as food reserves. But at this moment, these races all seem to have negotiated and released all the human races imprisoned in the prisons in their base areas. Lin En, who was floating in the sky, slowly opened his mouth again at the same time. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 359. Immediately afterwards, an indifferent voice that sounded like heaven came out of Lin An's mouth. The words he spoke filled the entire earth and reverberated throughout the heavens and the earth. I will establish a territory on the earth that belongs only to our human race. All humans can come here. Lin An's words once again reached the entire world. The large number of humans who had just been released from the prisons of various races all heard Lin An's words again. Their originally panic-stricken hearts now had a clear goal at this moment. Immediately, someone said excitedly. You have all heard what Mr. Linde said. He actually wants to establish a territory that belongs to our human race. Great, let's go to Mr. Linde's place. That is definitely the most suitable place for us humans to survive. Okay, then let's head towards where Mr. Linde is. Soon, all humans made this decision unanimously. They rushed directly towards Lin An's place, the place agreed upon by all races. At the same time, Lin An's words were not over yet. He still said in that very calm tone. From now on, where I am, only humans are allowed to exist within 1,000,000 miles. 3 days. I only give you 3 days. If after 3 days, there are other alien races within 1,000,000 miles of the place agreed upon by the human race as the center, then I will directly take action to wipe out these alien races. And as Lin An said these words, more and more human beings who heard his words began to rush towards the agreed place of the human race at a faster speed. Come over. What Lin An said is tantamount to using an extremely strong attitude to tell all the giant crocodiles of the old era on the earth. Now mankind has risen with extremely strong momentum. Regardless of whether you agree or not, the human race has suddenly become the most powerful existence. At the same time, those alien races located within 1,000,000 miles of the agreed place of the human race were also shocked by Lin An's strong declaration. The immortal who occupies the west side of the earth suddenly frowned, and a flash of displeasure flashed in his eyes. Emperor Lin. Just arrived on earth. Have such actions already been launched? Sure enough, you still can't underestimate this guy. It's time to discuss it with those two guys. Most of the aliens fell into silence. All the alien members stopped what they were doing, and ugly expressions froze on their faces. Hey! Leave quickly, Emperor Lin can't afford to provoke him. That's all, isn't it just a change of place? The rise of the human race is destined to be unstoppable. After a long time, there were only Psis, and the aliens within the range specified by Lin An began to migrate one by one. In the Black Snake Valley, the Black Snake King is still sitting on his seat, his capable subordinate who left earlier to free the humans imprisoned in the prison. Another answer came to him. The capable man lowered his head and asked the Black Snake King. Your Majesty, what should we do? Do you want to obey Emperor Lin's order, leave from the Black Snake Valley? A cold look flashed across the Black Snake King's vertical pupils, and he stuck out his tongue and twitched it several times quickly. Then he spoke with a somewhat fierce tone. Releasing all the humans will be a great honor to Emperor Lin. But now he has started to get worse. He actually wants us to leave the place where we settled. Emperor Lin has gone too far. The capable subordinate then asked. Then the king. You mean? Are we going to stay here? The Black Snake King nodded heavily, stood up from his seat, raised his head, and looked in the direction of Lin En. Right. I don't believe that Emperor Lin really dares to do this. The consequence of doing this is to put the human race on the opposite side of all races. A look of recognition flashed through the eyes of his right-hand assistant, and he couldn't help but nodded slightly and said. The king is right. From this moment on, the entire earth began to fall into a state of chaos, and countless humans and aliens began to run around on the earth. Lin An's figure was floating directly above the agreed place, and his gaze was like the eye of heaven, which could see all the space with a radius of millions of miles centered on him. I hope they take care of themselves. After uttering these words, Lin An directly crossed his legs and held them high in the sky. The eyes that looked at everything in the world slowly closed. At the same time, in a place extremely far away from the agreed place, 3 other giants besides the Void Lord actually appeared here at the same time. He who dominates the west side of the earth, the immortal palace, the ruler of the immortal. The one who dominates the south of the earth, the court of destiny, the master of the god of destiny. The one who dominates the north of the earth, the court of God, the master of the priest. The 3 of them floated in the sky, staring at each other. A few seconds later, the immortal spoke in a very solemn tone. What do you want to say about Lindy's actions? The next moment, the lips of the god of destiny, which were covered by a pure white mask, slowly moved. He has just risen, and it is a bit inappropriate to do this. And his actions have a great impact on us. It seems that he doesn't take us seriously at all. The priest of the divine court also nodded in approval, and a hoarse voice came. We can't let him go on like this. Otherwise, he may do something more extreme in the future. The earth will be completely out of our control. The immortal sighed lightly, and said in a helpless tone. It's all the fault of that waste, the Void Lord. You have to provoke Lin Di. And it's okay to provoke him, but in the end you drag us down. The three giants who occupy 3/5 of the Earth's territory reached a common decision after some discussions. They looked in the direction of the promised land, tore the space apart, and disappeared into the air. A few seconds later, Lin En, who was floating above the promised land, slowly opened his tightly closed eyes. He looked at the space that was starting to break apart 100 meters in front of him. With a slight twitch of his mouth, he said indifferently, "Here it comes. I can see the laws of things." Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 360. In the promised place, Yizhan and the others did not choose to leave at this moment. The rulers of these tribes decided to stay in this promised land and help Lin En do something. They no longer need to face life-threatening dangers at this moment. However, there are also some human beings who are curious about the Kyushu territory and choose to enter the space portal that connects the Kyushu territory and the promised land. At this time, the sound of space shattering echoed in the space, which also attracted the attention of Yizhan and others. They all raised their heads and looked at the messy sky. Under the gazes of Lin En, Yizhan and others, the space completely cracked, and a huge hole appeared. The immortal, the god of destiny, and the priest flew out of the crack in this space. The three of them looked directly at Lin En. In an instant, the eyes of the immortal, the god of destiny, and the priest met Lin En's eyes. Seeing Lin's expression without any surprises, the immortal's brows couldn't help but frown. After being silent for a few seconds, he asked, "You knew we were coming?" Lin nodded slightly and replied, "When something like this happened on Earth, how could you three tolerate it?" The god of destiny also took over the conversation at this time and said, "Now that you know that after doing something like this, we will come to find you, then you still dare to do such a thing?" He didn't understand very much. Lin En clearly knew the consequences of doing this. But he still did such a thing. Isn't this just looking for trouble for yourself? Looking towards the god of destiny, Lin En couldn't help but have a hint of ridicule in his eyes. "Just the three of you? You also want me to change the decision I made?" As soon as Lin En said these words, the bodies of the immortal, the god of destiny, and the priests suddenly stagnated, and their faces became very ugly. The immortal's fists were clenched tightly, and his sharp nails were about to pierce the flesh and blood. How arrogant! Never seen a person as arrogant as Emperor Lin. He gritted his teeth and said in a cold tone, "So what you mean is, you don't take the three of us seriously?" Lin En glanced at the immortal in surprise, raised his eyebrows slightly, and said in a calm tone, as expected of an old guy who has lived for so many years. I immediately understood what I meant. Seeing Lin En's appearance, the immortal, the god of destiny, and the priest once again fell into silence. This time, after the three of them were silent for a full minute, the priest slowly spoke. "It seems there is nothing left to talk about between us." The immortal also immediately spoke. "Emperor Lin, you asked for this. We didn't want to do anything like this." There was also a touch of coldness in the eyes of the god of destiny when he looked at Lin En, and he said in a contemptuous tone, "It's your own fault, no one else is to blame." Lin En, who had been sitting cross-legged in the sky, now slowly stretched his legs and stood up in the sky. After casually looking at the immortal, the god of destiny, and the priest, he said directly, "If you want to fight, fight. Why are you talking so much nonsense?" After saying that, Lin En directly took out the white sword, held it in his hand, took a step forward, and the law of space was activated, moving quickly above the high altitude. Lin En had already expected this to happen. At the same time, this is also part of his plan. In the current Earth, the biggest unstable elements are the Void Monarch, the Immortal, the God of Destiny, and the Priest, these four giants who dominate the world. If Lin wants to gain a foothold on Earth, he will inevitably have a fierce conflict with these four people. The Lord of the Void has been made to look like he is alive and dead, and the only unstable elements left are the immortal, the god of destiny, and the priest. As long as these three guys are convinced of themselves, Lin En and the human race will be able to completely establish a foothold on the earth. Yi Zhan was below and saw the scene in his eyes. Naturally, he also saw the last scene where Lin En took the white sword and took the initiative to attack the three giants, immortal, destiny god, and priest. Immediately his eyes glared angrily, waves of shock quickly took over his face, and a large amount of sweat appeared on his forehead for a moment. Lin, Lord Emperor Lin. What are you going to do? He actually took the initiative to attack the three of them. Whether it's an immortal, a god of destiny, or a priest. The strength of each of them. They are not weaker than the Void Lord. At this moment, Yi Zhan discovered that he could not guess Lin En's thoughts at all. In his opinion, this is something he wouldn't dare to do even if he had 100 courages. Lin En actually did it directly. Lord Lindy's thoughts? I don't understand. At the same time, Lin En had crossed a distance of hundreds of meters, holding a white sword and appearing in front of the three giants, the immortal, the god of destiny, and the priest. He raised the white sword high, and a mysterious breath flowed in his two purple eyes. The power of dozens of laws directly covered the blade of the white sword. Whoosh! A sound of breaking wind sounded, and the white sword was swung down by Lin En. The immortals also reacted at this time. They all subconsciously raised their hands and began to defend. Multi-layered thick law shields appeared in front of them. These shields were colorful, like indestructible walls, and even the air flowing around and the constantly blowing wind were blocked outside by these shields. The next moment, the white sword in Lin En's hand collided with the shield formed by the law. Boom! A loud crash sounded, and a strong impact swept out in all directions. Boom! 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 The whole world was impacted by the white sword and the law shield, and the impact began to shake violently. The white clouds were crumbling, and the earth was shaking. Yi Zhan, who was standing on the ground, lost control of his body in an instant. He fell heavily to the ground. He raised his head and looked up at the shaking sky, his eyes wide open. Gurgle! Gurgle! He swallowed his saliva into his stomach. He said in a lost voice. Good. What a terrible battle.